Hey everyone, my name is Tim Nair and I am a PhD student in the Department of Agricultural and Biosystems Engineering here at Iowa State. The focus of my research is on water quality monitoring, specifically for bacteria and antimicrobial resistance. Antimicrobial resistance is a way for bacteria to survive in the presence of an antibiotic. It fits the framework of the One Health concept, where human medicine, veterinary medicine, and environmental health are interconnected instead of being treated independently. Antimicrobial resistance is well studied in hospitals, however, not as much is known on the impacts of antibiotic usage in the livestock industry on antimicrobial resistance, where antibiotics are used for much of the same reasons as in hospitals for the control, prevention, and treatment of diseases. The environment in the One Health framework is the source and sink of antibiotic waste generated by hospitals and agriculture, and is the home of organisms that naturally produce antibiotics. Many organizations, such as the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization, are calling for the prudent use of antibiotics in hospitals and agriculture to ensure effective antibiotics in the future, because antimicrobial resistance can persist and spread, with the worst-case scenario of antibiotics becoming essentially useless. This research is important to the sustainability of the livestock industry to ensure the effective use of antibiotics for the future, so that they may remain profitable, as antimicrobial resistance could seriously disrupt operations due to significant decreases in animal health. The type of research projects that I work on are for developing better ways to monitor antimicrobial resistance in the soil and water in the agricultural landscape. The manure produced by livestock administered with antibiotics generally contains high levels of bacteria and antibiotic-resistant bacteria, as well as undigested antibiotics. The manure is typically applied to row crops as fertilizer, which is a common agricultural practice. So it's important to have efficient monitoring indicators to track the trends in antimicrobial resistance over time, and to evaluate the effects of best management practices on antimicrobial resistance.
Hello, my name is Meyer Bond, and I'm a PhD student studying digital soil mapping at Iowa State University. My specific objective is to map key soil properties that differentiate function and productivity across a physiographic region of the Des Moines lobe in Iowa. These target properties are soil organic matter, soil texture, and depth of water table. The Clarion-Nicollet-Webster Soil Association, from which these properties differentiate, covers 97% of this region. Soil formation has occurred in glacial sediments controlled by past erosion deposition processes impacted by near-surface hydrology. My hypothesis is that my specific set of digital soil mapping methods can produce maps with greater accuracy and spatial resolution than the best available soil maps provided by the NRCS Soil Survey Geographic Database. Now I'll lay out some important reasons for mapping these properties. One, as a soil geographer, I care about these properties because they're easily mappable across large extents and are relatively stable. These processes that are impacting soil properties in terms of erosion and deposition, as well as the impact of near-surface hydrology, mean that these soils are easily differentiated by topography. Another reason why these properties are relevant is because they're important for soil productivity and function, or usability. In Iowa, we've developed a corn suitability rating to give an index as to how productive these soils will be, mainly based on organic matter texture and drainage. Furthermore, these properties are important for agricultural management and modeling, especially for site-specific precision applications. These properties are important for petal transfer functions, which can calculate different hydrologic measures, such as infiltration, storage, capacity, and also nutrient storage and cycling. The need for enhanced soil survey maps and the problem we have is that site-specific sampling and mapping can be very expensive, and oftentimes researchers must rely on Surgo data to get their baseline input data for modeling and different applications. Unfortunately, these data are outdated and lack the spatial detail necessary for precision management. There are three major reasons for improving soil maps. One is soil change. In Iowa, the average county soil survey is over 30 years old. And over the past half-century, intensive agriculture and drainage have significantly altered soil organic matter, texture, and water table depth. The next reason being is antiquated technology. Traditional soil maps were made by overlaying paper base maps of topography, geology, and aerial photographs and drawing lines in accordance with field observations. Mental models gained from field experience were semi-quantitative and rarely documented, often only as soil block diagrams. Lastly, these maps are too coarse of resolution. The average map delineation in central Iowa is about 10 acres, yet well-drained soils can occur tens of meters away from poorly drained soils. Although these soils require dramatically different management strategies, the soil maps generalize this detail variability. So my digital soil mapping solution comes from integrating geographic information systems, remote sensing, and machine learning to quantitatively describe environmental soil forming factors and create predictive spatial models at high resolution to capture site-specific soil variability. One such example is the topographic wetness index, a measure of the degree of soil drainage. Note the fine variability of the index within the coarse delineations of the current soil survey, outlined in white. I've compiled a comprehensive database with thousands of legacy soil samples and nearly 200 new field samples, and I've generated over 500 land surface derivatives with an emphasis on unique high-resolution terrain derivatives as to capture that site-specific fine within-field soil variability. The resulting maps will generate predictions at 3-meter resolution, and not only for the surface, but for several depth intervals down to 2 meters. The project is not yet completed, but join me later today as I discuss preliminary digital soil mapping investigations, accuracy metrics, and performance comparison against Sergo. Thank you.
Each year in the Midwest, around 75% of the arable land is planted with just 2 annual crops, corn and soybean. It wasn't always this way. For example, Iowa used to grow substantial amounts of oats, wheat, rye, alfalfa, and even apples. It also had large expanses of native prairie and wetlands and woodlands. By simplifying the landscape so drastically, we've robbed it of the ability to buffer our towns against flooding. We've made farmers more susceptible to market shocks. We've lost the ability to support and enjoy iconic Iowa treasures like a summer swim in the lake, a bird hunt in the prairie, and the joy of watching monarch butterflies migrate. It doesn't have to be this way. There is a robust body of research showing diversified cropping systems can sustain high levels of agricultural production, while simultaneously requiring fewer inputs, providing areas that support natural beauty and enjoyment, all while being better buffered against weather and market shocks. And yet, these simple systems persist. They not only persist, but they're expanding. Transitioning to more diverse systems will require concerted effort from the public, government, and corporations. In the meantime, a few researchers continue to find out how targeted diversification of these systems can benefit society. For my PhD, I've looked at the agronomic implications of diversification. I've looked at the effects of perennializing the corn-soybean systems by adding a winter cover crop, and also of extending the corn-soybean rotation to include more functionally diverse crops. For example, I've found that by extending the corn-soybean rotation to include crops that have a different planting date, on average, there are about half as many weeds that need spraying in the field. So this prolongs the useful life of herbicides and also reduces the need for more toxic measures. I've also found that when corn is grown in longer rotations, its root system is deeper and more absorbent, which makes it better buffered against dry spells. So when the US decides to prioritize the well-being of its farmers and their communities, as well as the natural resources that agriculture depends upon, there will be science ready and waiting to support it.
My name is Haley Summers, and I'm a second-year PhD student in sustainable agriculture. My dissertation is titled Geospatial and Economic Analysis of Conservation Practices in Iowa. As I'm sure many of you are aware, there are a lot of water quality issues in the state of Iowa, Here you can see in orange and red all the impaired waters in 2018. And these are mostly due to nutrient runoff from farm fields. So in an agricultural state like Iowa, we have a lot of nutrient runoff, causing a lot of issues. Thankfully, there are some solutions called conservation practices or best management practices, as shown in some of these examples here. These practices are meant to stop nutrients or pollution from leaving the farm fields and getting into the water. One of these practices that I really want to focus on are prairie strips, or strips of prairie integrated into row crop fields, just like you see in this picture. My dissertation is focused on the economics of incorporating those prairie strips into row crop fields. I also want to focus on subfield profitability, so thinking about where in-field conservation practices should go. And also looking at geospatial modeling and conservation practices across the state, so looking at where conservation practices have been mapped previously and where they are now. We already know that implementation of these prairie strips costs less than $100 per treated hectare, or less than $40 per treated acre. But what I want to know is what are the long-term management implications of prairie strips? So are farmers having to change how they manage the rest of their field or going around these prairie strips? Something else I want to study is strips relocation economics. So there's this theory that there's a yield increase after removing prairie strips due to the increased soil health in that area where the strips were previously. So I want to look at, if we do move those prairie strips, what are the economics of having that yield increase, and how are we going to be most efficient with moving these prairie strips in the field economically? Another focus of my dissertation is subfield profitability, or where to place prairie strips or conservation practices in a field. We can place them based on biophysical aspects, so that's where the most of the nutrients are actually going to be stopped, or we can place them based on economic aspects. So looking at areas of the field that are making the least amount of yield and making the farmers the least amount of money, to really save the farmers as much money as possible. And one last project I'm focusing on is incorporating the BMP mapping project with the agricultural conservation planning framework. So using these two tools to figure out where conservation practices have been placed in the landscape previously, where they are currently, and where they should be going in the future.